You're shopping for clothes. Fifth floor of a luxury department store. Seoul, summer evening. The air conditioning hums. Music plays softly. And then you hear a crack. Loud, like a gunshot. You look up. The ceiling has a fissure running across it. You see other shoppers looking up too, confused, concerned. An employee walks by. You ask if everything is okay. She says yes. The store remains open. You continue shopping. 17 minutes later, the floor beneath you disintegrates. 5 stories collapse in 20 seconds. You fall through exploding concrete and twisted steel. 502 people die. 640 are injured. And the executives who owned the building knew it was failing. They evacuated themselves the night before. They moved their merchandise to safety, but they kept the store open. They kept you inside. June 29th, 1995. The Sampoong department store. Sicho District, Seoul, South Korea. One of the most luxurious shopping destinations in the city. 5 floors, restaurants, boutiques, an ice skating rink in the basement. Over 1,000 people inside on this Thursday evening. The building has been open for less than 6 years, but it was doomed from the day construction began. The structure was designed as an office building, 4 floors, reinforced concrete. But during construction, the owner changed his mind. He wanted a department store, more profitable. The design was altered. A 5th floor was added. Support columns were removed to make space for escalators. The foundation was not upgraded. Engineers warned this was dangerous. The owner fired them and hired new ones who would approve the changes. The building opened in 1989, and from the beginning, there were problems. This is the story of the Sampoong department store collapse, the design flaws that made disaster inevitable, the warning signs that were ignored, the executives who chose profit over safety, and the 20 seconds that killed over 500 people. The Sampoong department store began as a different project. In 1987, Lee Jun, chairman of the Sampoong Group, commissioned an office building in the Sicho district of Seoul. The site was in a wealthy area. Real estate was valuable. Lee wanted a modern office complex, 4 stories, standard design. He hired the Woosung Construction Company to handle the project. Engineers drew up plans, permits were obtained, construction began. But Lee changed his mind. He decided a department store would be more profitable. Office buildings generate rental income. Department stores generate higher revenue through retail sales. Lee wanted the higher revenue, so he ordered the design changed, mid-construction. The building would now be a luxury shopping center, 5 floors instead of 4. An additional story was added to the top, and the interior layout was completely altered. Department stores require open floor space, wide aisles, escalators connecting floors. The original office design had numerous support columns. They provided structural stability, but would obstruct the shopping experience. Lee ordered many of the columns removed. Engineers objected. Removing load-bearing columns compromises structural integrity. The remaining columns would carry more weight than designed. Lee did not care. He wanted open space. He fired the original engineering firm. He hired a new firm that approved the changes. The foundation was another problem. It was designed for a 4-story office building. The additional 5th floor increased the weight significantly. Department stores also have heavier floor loads than offices. Shelving, inventory, crowds of shoppers. All of this adds weight. The foundation should have been reinforced. It was not. Lee did not want delays or additional costs. Construction continued with the inadequate foundation. The Woosung Construction Company, the original contractor, refused to continue under the new design. They withdrew from the project. Lee's own construction company, Sampoong Construction, took over. The Sampoong Group was building its own building. There was no independent oversight, no checks and balances. Lee Jun controlled the entire process. The building opened in December 1989. It was an immediate success. Luxury brands opened boutiques, restaurants filled the upper floors, the basement ice skating rink was popular. thousands of shoppers visited daily. The Sampoong department store became one of Seoul's premier shopping destinations. But from the beginning, employees noticed problems. The building would vibrate when heavy vehicles passed on the street. This is not normal for a modern concrete structure. Cracks appeared in walls and ceilings within the first year. They were patched and painted over. The building settled unevenly. Floors became slightly sloped. Doors would not close properly. Maintenance staff reported these issues. Management dismissed them as minor, cosmetic, nothing to worry about. By 1995, the problems were worsening. The fifth floor housed several restaurants with heavy equipment, large refrigerators, industrial ovens. Air conditioning units were particularly massive. They sat on the roof directly above the fifth floor. Each unit weighed tons, and they vibrated constantly. The vibration transmitted into the structure. The already overloaded columns were subjected to continuous dynamic stress. Cracks grew larger. In April 1995, employees on the fifth floor noticed the ceiling sagging visibly. Tiles were cracked. Water pipes were leaking. Maintenance crews inspected. They saw the concrete was cracking. Support beams were showing stress fractures. They reported this to management. Management told them to keep working. The store remained open. The construction of the Sampoong department store was plagued with shortcuts and cost-cutting from the beginning. After the original contractor withdrew, Lee Jun's own company took over. This created a conflict of interest. The company building the structure also owned it. There was no independent quality control. Inspections were minimal. Lee could make decisions without external challenge. The removal of support columns was the most critical error. The original design included numerous columns to distribute weight evenly throughout the structure. When Lee ordered them removed to create open retail space, the load was redistributed to fewer columns. Each remaining column now carried more weight than it was designed to handle. The concrete and steel reinforcement were sized for lower loads. Overloading them was a recipe for failure. The foundation was poured for a 4-story building. When the fifth floor was added, the foundation should have been reinforced. Deep pilings should have been added to transfer the increased weight to bedrock. This was not done. The foundation was inadequate from day one. The building was essentially built on a base too weak to support it. The fifth floor was particularly problematic. It was added after construction had begun. The columns supporting it were extended upward from the fourth floor, but these columns were already carrying maximum design load. Adding another floor overloaded them. The concrete began to crack under stress. Microfractures developed. Over time, these fractures grew. The rooftop air conditioning units made everything worse. In typical construction, heavy mechanical equipment is placed in basements or at ground level. Putting massive air conditioning units on the roof adds significant weight at the top point of the structure. This creates a top-heavy condition. The structure becomes less stable, and the vibration from the running units transmits stress throughout the building continuously. The construction quality was poor. Concrete was mixed incorrectly in some batches. Too much water, not enough cement. This creates weaker concrete. Reinforcing steel bars were spaced too far apart in some areas. This reduces tensile strength. Welds were incomplete. Inspections were cursory. Lee Jun was in a hurry to open the store. Quality was sacrificed for speed. During construction, workers noticed problems. Concrete would crack shortly after being poured. Forms would shift before concrete fully cured. But deadlines were tight. Workers were told to continue. Complaints were ignored. The project moved forward. The building was completed in 1989. It passed final inspection, but the inspection was superficial. Structural defects were not identified, or they were overlooked. From the moment the building opened, it was failing, slowly, imperceptibly at first. The overloaded columns were under constant stress. Concrete is strong in compression, but weak in tension. When concrete is overloaded, it cracks. The cracks allow moisture to reach the steel reinforcement. The steel rusts. Rust expands. This creates more cracks. The process accelerates. Over 6 years, the structure deteriorated, and by June 1995, It was on the verge of catastrophic failure. June 28, 1995. One day before the collapse, employees on the 5th floor hear strange sounds. Cracking, creaking. The building is groaning. A large crack appears in the ceiling. It runs several meters. Water is leaking. The crack is wide enough to see into the floor above. Employees are frightened. They report it to management. Lee Jun, the chairman, is informed. He inspects the 5th floor personally. He sees the crack. He sees the sagging ceiling. He knows what this means. The building is failing. An evacuation should be ordered immediately, but Lee does not evacuate. He does not close the store. Instead, he makes a decision that will haunt South Korea for decades. He orders his executives to remove valuable merchandise and company records from the building, quietly, without alarming customers or employees. That night, Lee and his executives work through the early morning hours. They move expensive inventory to a warehouse, files, records, anything of value. But they do not warn employees. They do not notify authorities. They do not close the store. At dawn on June 29th, the Sampoong department store opens for business as usual. Shoppers arrive. The store fills. By late afternoon, over 1,000 people are inside. Employees notice the cracks are growing. The 5th floor ceiling is visibly sagging. Some employees are too frightened to work. They leave. Others stay. They need their jobs. Management assures them everything is fine. Structural engineers are coming to assess the situation. There is no danger. But there is no assessment planned. Lee Jun knows the building is collapsing. He is simply hoping it will hold a little longer, long enough to move more merchandise, long enough to avoid a panic that might damage his company's reputation. He is gambling with lives. At 5:30 p.m., the sounds intensify. Loud cracking. The 5th floor is shaking. An employee on the 4th floor sees ceiling tiles falling. She hears the concrete groaning. She calls management. She is told to stay calm, to continue working. 27 minutes left. At 5:52 p.m., a customer on the 5th floor sees the ceiling collapsing. She screams. Other shoppers look up. A section of ceiling caves in. Debris falls. People start running for the exits. Employees finally begin evacuating, but the process is chaotic. There is no plan, no training. Some escalators are shut down. Some exits are locked. People are confused, panicked. At 5:55 p.m., executives on the 1st floor begin leaving the building. They know what is coming. They evacuate themselves, but they do not sound a general alarm. They do not order a full evacuation. Customers on the 3rd and 4th floors are still shopping, unaware. At 5:57 p.m. and 54 seconds, the 5th floor collapses, the entire floor, at once. It pancakes onto the 4th floor. The 4th floor cannot support the impact. It collapses onto the 3rd onto the 2nd. In 20 seconds, 5 floors become a single layer of crushed concrete and steel. Over 1,000 people are inside. 502 of them will not survive. The collapse sounds like an explosion. A cloud of dust erupts from the building. Debris shoots outward. Cars parked nearby are crushed by falling concrete. People on the street are hit by fragments. Inside, shoppers and employees are buried under tons of rubble. Some are killed instantly. Others are trapped, pinned by concrete, crushed by steel beams, unable to move, unable to call for help. Emergency services arrive within minutes. Police, firefighters, ambulances. They find a scene of unimaginable devastation. The building's center section has completely collapsed. Only the outer walls remain partially standing. The interior is a mountain of rubble. Dust is everywhere. And from within the debris, they hear screaming. There was no completion for the Sampoong department store. It was destroyed. But the rescue operation became one of the largest in South Korean history. Hundreds of emergency workers descended on the site. They began digging through the rubble by hand. Heavy equipment was brought in. cranes, excavators. But they had to work carefully. The debris was unstable. Moving one piece could collapse another section, and there were people alive inside. The rescue effort continued for days, then weeks. Survivors were pulled from the rubble. Some had been trapped for hours, others for days. They survived in air pockets, small spaces where concrete slabs had fallen at angles, creating voids. Some had access to water from broken pipes. Others had none. Rescuers worked around the clock. Listening devices detected heartbeats. Cameras on flexible cables searched crevices. Dogs sniffed for survivors. The last survivor was found on July 16th, 16 days after the collapse. Park Seung-hyun, a 19-year-old employee. She had been trapped in a small void. She survived by drinking rainwater that seeped through the rubble. When rescuers pulled her out, South Korea watched on live television. It was a moment of hope amid overwhelming tragedy. But Park was the last. No more survivors were found. The final toll was devastating. 502 dead, 640 injured. Many of the injured suffered life-altering trauma, crushed limbs, spinal injuries, psychological damage that would last forever. Families were destroyed. Children lost parents. Parents lost children. The nation mourned. Investigations began immediately. How did this happen? Who was responsible? Engineers examined the debris. They found the evidence of poor construction, overloaded columns, inadequate foundation, removed supports, substandard concrete. Every shortcut Lee Jun had taken was documented. The design changes, the ignored warnings, the cracks that had been visible for months. And then investigators learned the most damning detail. Lee Jun and his executives had evacuated themselves and their merchandise the night before the collapse, while leaving customers and employees inside. The public was outraged. This was not an accident. It was negligence. Criminal negligence. It was murder. Lee Jun was arrested. So were several executives and engineers who approved the faulty design. They were charged with criminal negligence and manslaughter. The trial was highly publicized. Lee showed little remorse. He claimed he did not know the building was in danger. The evidence said otherwise. In 1996, Lee Jun was convicted and sentenced to 10.5 years in prison. His son, Lee Han-sang, also an executive, received 7 years. The engineers received shorter sentences. The site was cleared. The rubble was removed. For years, the lot remained empty. A memorial was erected. It lists the names of the 502 victims. Flowers are placed there. Families visit. South Korea does not forget. The Sampoong department store collapse changed South Korea's approach to building safety. Before 1995, construction regulations were often loosely enforced. Developers had significant influence over inspections. Corners were cut, profits were prioritized. Sampoong forced a reckoning. New building codes were implemented, stricter inspection protocols, independent oversight. Engineers who approve unsafe designs now face criminal liability. The penalties are severe. The goal is to ensure that no one can build another Sampoong, that no owner can sacrifice safety for profit without facing consequences. The disaster also exposed the dangers of rapid development. South Korea's economy grew explosively in the 1980s and 90s. Construction boomed, skyscrapers rose quickly, but quality control lagged. Sampoong was a symptom of a larger problem: speed over safety, profit over people. The collapse forced the nation to slow down, to prioritize structural integrity. The rescue operation itself became a case study. 16 days to find the last survivor. That is an extraordinary length of time. It demonstrated the importance of never giving up, of searching every void, of listening for every heartbeat. South Korean rescue protocols were updated based on lessons learned at Sampoong. Training improved. Equipment was upgraded. The psychological impact on South Korea was profound. Shopping malls and department stores are part of modern life. People trust that buildings are safe. Sampoong shattered that trust. For years after the collapse, shoppers in Seoul would nervously check ceilings for cracks, listen for unusual sounds. The trauma was collective, a shared national experience. The memorial at the site serves a purpose beyond remembrance. It is a warning, a reminder of what happens when greed overrides responsibility, when warnings are ignored, when human lives are valued less than profit. The names on the memorial are not just victims of a building collapse. They are victims of a system that allowed Lee Jun to build a death trap and fill it with customers. The collapse also raised questions about corporate accountability. Lee Jun served 10.5 years. He was released in 2005. Some believe the sentence was lenient. 502 people died because of his decisions. Others argue that structural engineers and government inspectors also bore responsibility. They approved a building that should never have been certified. The blame was shared, but the punishment was not. Survivor stories continue to emerge. Park Sung-hyun, the last survivor, has spoken about her 16 days trapped in darkness. The fear, the thirst, the sounds of rescuers growing closer. Her story is one of resilience, but it is also a story of trauma. Many survivors suffer from PTSD. The sound of a building creaking, the sight of a crack in a ceiling. These trigger panic. The collapse did not end when the rubble was cleared. It continues in the minds of those who survived. The Sampoong department store collapse of 1995 remains one of the deadliest building failures in modern history. 502 people died in 20 seconds when 5 floors pancaked into rubble. But the collapse was not an accident. It was the result of criminal negligence. The building was designed as an office complex, but changed to a department store mid-construction. Support columns were removed. The foundation was inadequate. Executives knew the building was failing. Large cracks appeared the day before the collapse. Chairman Lee Jun evacuated himself and his merchandise, but he kept the store open. He kept customers inside. And at 5:57 p.m. on June 29th, the building collapsed. The rescue operation lasted 16 days. The last survivor, Park Sung-hyun, was pulled from the rubble on July 16th. Over 1,000 people were inside when the floors collapsed. 502 did not survive. Lee Jun was convicted and sentenced to 10.5 years in prison. South Korea changed its building codes, strengthened inspections, but the 502 names on the memorial cannot be brought back. If you want to uncover more stories of global infrastructure hiding dark secrets, subscribe to Hidden Infrastructure. Next time, we will explore the Viant Dam disaster in Italy, where engineers ignored warnings about an unstable mountain. A massive landslide plunged into the reservoir, creating a wave 250 meters high that overtopped the dam and destroyed villages below. Nearly 2,000 people drowned. The dam itself survived intact, but was never used again. Subscribe now for more hidden infrastructure stories. And remember, the Sampoong department store taught the world that buildings do not collapse by accident. They collapse because someone chose profit over safety. 502 people paid the price, and Lee Jun knew it was coming.